The story that begins with Judaism in the history of religions actually continues with another religion that is entirely a story in itself, Christianity, which today covers almost 1/3 of the world's population. When I started by calling it a story, I was not exaggerating or being a wordsmith at all. Christianity is truly the greatest story ever told. And contrary to what you might think, the author of this story is not Jesus, but the great Roman Empire that crucified and killed him. Let's find the truths of this story, which has led to the deaths of hundreds of millions of people and the rise and fall of states throughout history. One day, the holy star of Bethlehem in the sky announces the arrival of a holy baby, and 3 wise men follow it to a stable where the Virgin Mary gives birth to Jesus, the Son of God. As I said, it's a story told for 2,000 years. The tale of the 3 wise men, which Christians listen to with teary eyes, is actually a highly symbolic astronomical event. The bright star in the east, followed by the 3 wise men, is actually the Sirius star. And the day presented to the public as the birthday of Jesus is nothing but the winter solstice. The so-called 3 wise men are not actually people, but the 3 stars in the Orion's belt that align with the Sirius star on that day. And this alignment is oriented according to the angle at which the sun will rise exactly on the day of the winter solstice. But lo and behold, the storytellers tell us the event completely differently. When we search for evidence or record, once again, no source other than the Bible emerges. None of these stories told, and none of the other related events they tell you, the lavish holidays, special days like Jesus died for 3 days and then resurrected and so on, none of this happened. It's all a lie. For example, the story of Jesus remaining dead for 3 days and then resurrecting, as I just mentioned, is related to the sun, just like the story of the 3 wise men. It is taken from the Pagan's Winter Solstice celebration on December 21st. The sun remains fixed at its lowest position for 3 days on December 21st, and then starts to rise again, lengthening the days. This equinox is from the days thousands of years ago when people worshiped the sun. Keep the concept of sun worship in the back of your mind, because the information you will learn by the end of this video will surprise you. These and similar distortions and lies were personally written in our beautiful Iznik, located within the borders of our country, and serve to the world, perhaps setting back the development of humanity by centuries. Forget the white-skinned Superman-esque Jesus you see in movies. The true story is a struggle for truth by a humble humanist prophet against the system. Exactly where and under what conditions Jesus was born is heavily obscured. The only thing we are sure of is that he was not a Christian, but a Jew, born within a conflict between Jewish and pagan beliefs, or, in the dominant form of the time, a Jew. Although almost everyone today thinks that Jesus automatically came into possession of all secrets when the time was right on the path to prophethood, instantly turning into someone who could walk on water and heal the sick. The path of a prophet to becoming a perfect human being is never easy. In his search for truth, Jesus spent a long time in the deserts and was deeply educated in matters of healing, energy, and knowledge by the Essenes, one of history's most secretive and mysterious communities. This information is never written in most religious books. According to them, Jesus went to the desert for 40 days, was trained by angels there, fought the devil, and became enlightened, as I said, a whole story. Subsequently, he returned to the city and began to preach to the people and teach his truth. Perhaps due to his nature or the excitement of his youth, Jesus strongly opposed the Jewish faith and symbolism of the time. While fighting against corrupt Judaism, he also began fighting against the oppressive Roman system. If you haven't watched my documentary on Judaism, you might not fully grasp the current information. That's why I recommend you watch that first. As a person who understood how Judaism had become corrupted through his education, Jesus began to oppose the absurd teachings of the rabbis and started to spread the teachings of the essential religion, the Jewish faith, teaching the naive belief in God, far from symbolism, to the public. This disturbed both the Jewish lobby of the time, including the Masons, because the system of Judaism they established absolutely never accepts the questioning of religion. It relies on a system of blind obedience. Likewise, Jesus, who also fought against Roman oppression, entered a solitary struggle against the belief and state superpowers of the time. And ultimately, Rome and the Jews set up a conspiracy, captured Jesus. And sadly, they caused this good person to depart from this world at a young age, perhaps without fully completing his mission. So, if Jesus didn't complete his mission, how did this religion turn into a system with dozens of holidays, festivals, and fantastical stories today? This is where we come to the story part I mentioned in the introduction. The death of Jesus did not cause his ideas to fade away. On the contrary, his teachings were embraced by the persecuted people and began to spread in the empire. Realizing the situation, Rome was finally forced to accept the unstoppable progress of this religion among the people, despite interventions that we can honestly call very savage and inhumane for many years. But this acceptance has nothing to do with the Roman Empire finding enlightenment, as you are told. The sole reason was the evolution of belief for the survival of the empire. It is precisely for this reason that after Emperor Constantine I made Christianity the official religion of the state, the papacy system began to be established. This system was established to control the people by manipulating their beliefs and to direct them for wars and sacrifices when necessary. Of course, to create an ignorant religious mass, symbolism is needed to distract the individual from the essence of the matter. For this reason, the famous Council of Nicaea was convened and a holy book for the religion began to be created. Yes, we are talking about the birth of the Bible. The Bible is not a book that came down from the heavens through revelation. It is a book where a group of men took things from various pagan, Jewish, and Greek books, made them into a story, and presented them to the public. And at these meetings, a Jesus figure began to be created. The beings they were inspired by were entities from ancient beliefs. Think of it like creating a comic book character today. Basic concepts were taken from the Egyptian god Horus, the Persian god Mithra, the Hindu god Krishna, and the Greek Dionysus. And these abilities were given to the Jesus figure created by Rome. For example, turning water into wine is taken from Dionysus. Resurrection comes from the legends of Krishna, Horus, and Mithra. To make this false religion more appealing, the holy days and symbols of an ancient world paganism were adopted and Christian meanings were attributed to them. And it was presented to the culture. For example, Halloween actually comes from the Samhain festival, which symbolizes the end of summer and the beginning of winter, and celebrates the marriage season. Another simple example is the Easter holiday. According to Christians, this holiday is celebrated to commemorate the resurrection of Jesus after his death. And it is very, very holy, and so on. In reality, however, this holiday was celebrated in the pagan faith to mark the end of winter and the arrival of spring, the rebirth of nature. Of course, back then there was no internet or printing press, and the main source of information for the public was the word-of-mouth system, so they could not access these truths. However, Rome likes to cover every loophole, and therefore, following the transition to Christianity, it literally destroyed and committed genocide against all cultures and states with pagan beliefs. Not only that, all records and teachings belonging to Jesus were destroyed, all his apostles who spread the original teaching and their students were killed, and their entire existence was erased from state archives. So much so that the only official record about Jesus that has reached us today is a document stating that a young man from Nazareth was executed for sedition against the state. Even whether this document is referring to Jesus has not yet been proven. There are no other official original records. Isn't that strange? In an empire where everything from the food they ate and drank to daily life was noted, there is not a single record about the hero of such a great revolutionary event. Is the story over? Of course not. You have to constantly add new things to a story so that people don't wake up but continue to sleep. The religion of humanity, which was actually a Jewish one, is translated as Christianity, meaning the worship of the Blessed One, that is, Jesus Christ. And again, at the Council of Nicaea, it was decided by joint resolution that Jesus was not a human prophet, but God, because a prophet coming after Jesus could pose a risk to the Roman people's fabricated belief. In this way, a system was established that would categorize the next prophet, Prophet Muhammad, as a mortal and declare him an impostor. After all, why would they believe in the religion of another Arab prophet when they have God Jesus? You see the effects of this tactic today. In Orthodox churches, Jesus and God are still worshipped as the same entity, and Prophet Muhammad and Islam are never accepted. Years passed, everything changed, and Rome realized the monster it created too late. The Papacy system and the Vatican. This system, established to tell stories to people and pull the wool over their eyes, gradually took control of the ignorant populace and turned into a giant power. So much so that it challenged the empire itself. Consequently, with the division of Rome into two and the conquest of Istanbul by the Ottomans, as the era of Rome ended, the Papacy and the Vatican covered the entire power vacuum like a poisonous ivy. For centuries, they called science blasphemy and hindered the progress of humanity. They declared women to be witches. They declared those who did not submit to their protection as infidels. And they caused the annihilation of millions of people. Today, researchers believe that humanity suffered a loss of an average of 300 years in civilization and technological progress due to the institution of the papacy. And the only reason for this whole game is to prevent humanity from developing and realizing how absurd the story being told actually is. Of course, let's not forget the unlimited money and power as well. For those who say, "No way, let me give you a small example," When the Bible was translated into English for the first time and distributed to the public, the papacy was horrified. Fearing that the people would understand the scriptures, all copies were collected and burned. Not only that, the translators and readers were also mercilessly declared infidels and burned. If anyone among you thinks that the Vatican has the slightest interest in religion, let me clarify that point immediately. The institution called the Vatican and its staff do not believe in concepts like God, Jesus, Him, this or that. In fact, they do not even believe in a concept we call monotheistic religion. In reality, the Vatican holds the corrupted sun worship belief of ancient Egypt. This figure you see is a Jesus figure found in almost every church in the world. And behind all these figures, if you pay attention, there is a circle symbol. They pass this off to the ignorant public as the holy halo. But it is actually the holy sun symbol, and Jesus is only an entity that refers to it. It is possible to find the same symbol in thousands of hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt. Examples continue for those who are not satisfied. You are currently seeing an aerial view of the Vatican, the so-called heart of Christianity. Pay attention to the construction shape and the lines in the square. This symbol is one of the symbols of the sun god, and right in the middle is a giant obelisk brought from Egypt. For some reason, the center of Christianity is built in the shape of the sun god symbol. How surprising! The concept of the sun does not end with these. In his basic teachings, Jesus opposed centralized belief systems, just as every prophet advocated. This event is understood more clearly in the books of some writers who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls before they were confiscated. But for some reason, the Vatican erects a church on every corner and uses these structures to spread its false doctrines to the public and to take money from them on top of that. And they perform these rituals, how surprising, on Sunday. That is, on the day of the sun, which we know as Sunday in English. You can easily find dozens of more examples like these on the internet. Apart from these, there is also the concept of denominations in Christianity. Actually, the most obvious concept showing the collapse of every religion is this division into sects. There are three main denominations in Christianity. These are Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant. And as always, these denominations emerged not because of an intention to achieve religious enlightenment, but entirely for political and arbitrary reasons. Catholic is the denomination that advocates the belief based on the Roman Empire. Protestantism is a more moderate and modernist Christian denomination that emerged in the 1500s by Martin Luther against the rigid and oppressive attitude of the Roman Church. The Orthodox denomination is a concept established to represent the faith denomination of Eastern Rome, when Rome was divided into two, East and West. It is a faith denomination centered in Istanbul, the capital of Eastern Rome at the time, not Rome-based. Regardless of the differences in sects and views, the fundamental problem remains the same: the fact that Christianity is entirely man-made. 2,000 years have passed, and now humanity has started to wake up from the stories. Today, the fastest-growing belief systems in Christian countries are atheism and deism. It is predicted that Christianity, that is, this religion in the places where it was born, will turn into a minority religion in Europe before the year 2080. Just like in the first fundamental law of Newton, one of the greatest names in science, which the Church did its best to forbid. For every action, there will absolutely be an equal and opposite reaction. The information that everyone who reads 2 lines can access is available everywhere. But unfortunately, people are so insistent on remaining ignorant that they turn their backs on this truth and continue to believe in the God Jesus fabricated by Rome in that fairy tale world, even if it is a lie. Isn't it strange? In the story written by Rome nearly 350 years after Jesus' death, there is a baby who speaks in a cradle. He walks on water, resurrects the dead, can feed armies with 1 loaf of bread and 1 fish, and all that's missing is him flying with his cape and shooting lasers from his eyes. But outside of the Bible and the unsupported texts written by the same characters, there is no historical archive of these stories in any official state record or in the writings of the poets and writers of the period. We are talking about a society that went crazy with fear when they saw a solar eclipse. But no one, for some reason, took a single note about this superhuman. Even the state has no knowledge of this event. It's truly surprising. Of course, if all this never happened, it's very normal for a logical individual that these were not noted in history either. Actually, this event is not unique to Christianity. In the previous documentary, Judaism, you saw that human touch ruined a religion as well. Although Christianity has completely turned into a human design, all religions suffer from the same fate in the end. In the next episode, we will look at Islam and how it began its path, and how it was transformed once again by human hands into what it is today. In fact, this video, with all its details, could have been about an hour long, but to avoid making it boring, I simplified and summarized the events as much as possible. If you want to research the topic in more depth, there are many excellent videos on YouTube. They examine everything I've talked about, both philosophical subjects and historical ones, in far greater detail, step by step. See you next week. Take care.